who are darker than blue. Don't let us hang around this town and let what others say come true. We're just good for nothing. They all figure a boy should grown up shit.
Peace and happy Friday, everybody. This is Darker Than Blue, the show where we talk about politics for the people who you just heard Brother Curtis Mayfield say are darker than blue. I am Jackie Lukeman. So good to have you all with me today. So glad you are joining from wherever you are listening. If you're listening on 89.3 FM, on your radio dial, if you are watching on Black Liberation Media on YouTube, if you are watching on Lukeman Nation on Facebook or Black Liberation Media on Facebook, or if you're watching on Lukeman Nation through Instagram or Patreon. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. So happy to have you here. Shout out to my family, to Aunt Clara and Uncle Junie on this Friday evening. I hope they've been having a wonderful day. Shout out to my dad and Nikita down in Fayetteville, North Carolina. I love you guys. And my little brother and his Mrs., my sis in love, Jessica, and all the babies down there in Emporia, Virginia. Shout out to my cousin Stefan Jefferson hanging out here up around the DC area. Thank you to my family. Love you all. So glad that we made it to another Friday, because these days, y'all, who knows anymore? And just one of the things that I wanted to talk about, excuse me, very quickly. You heard it in the news segment. This whole situation with Trump and the Epstein files. I'm just amazed at how the tables have kind of turned, because Trump has now, excuse me, called the Epstein situation a hoax. He's called it a conspiracy hoax, and he's turned on his MAGA supporters. Can y'all believe that? Well, he did it. Why did he turn on his supporters? He called them weaklings, y'all. Why? Because he's facing backlash from his supporters over claims that he is hiding the details of Epstein's crimes to protect the rich elite, which of course includes Trump. Now, the US president is struggling to contain a political crisis within his usually unshakably loyal Make America Great Again, or MAGA, base, for those of you who don't know what that means, over their suspicion that he, in particular, is hiding details of Epstein's crimes, hiding the client list that now, at first Pam Bondi said the client list was on her desk. Now the Department of Justice says, client list? What client list? What are you talking about? And of course, this documentation, this client list, of course, it includes Trump. Come on. But in a lengthy post on his social media website, Truth Social, Trump accused his supporters of falling for what he called, I can't believe this, a radical left hoax by the opposition to discredit him. Now, listen, of all the things we in the radical left might be, rightfully accused of doing, creating a hoax based on child sex trafficking, that's not, no. But anyway, Trump said on his Truth Social account, this is his tweet, quote, "Their new scam," with scam in all caps, "is what we will forever call the Jeffrey Epstein hoax. And my past in all caps, supporters have bought into this, I can't say the word, BS. Hook, line, and sinker. They haven't learned their lesson and probably never will, even after being conned by the lunatic left for 8 long years. He then said, let these weaklings continue forward and do the Democrats' work. The Democrats didn't even come up with this. They don't even have the spine to come up with a conspiracy like this against Trump. But anyway, he said, don't even think about talking of our incredible, unprecedented success because I don't want their support anymore. End quote. That's what he said on his little tantrum tweet. He had a moment. One of the most dramatic theories, though, circulating among Trump supporters is that Epstein, and at this point, is it really a theory? I don't think it is. Epstein, who killed himself in 2019 while in federal custody, was murdered. That's the theory, that he was murdered by powerful figures to cover up their roles in his sex crimes against children. And Republican voters and politicians have pressed Trump to publicly release documents related to the case, which have become known as the Epstein files. Now, multiple users on Truth Social, yes, people actually sign up and use that thing, responded to Trump's post calling for him to release more information, like literally responding to his post. One poster said, "You're losing your most loyal followers and voices, Mr. President." And another said, "Why are you protecting pedophiles?" Trump's tirade was an angry departure from his previous attempts to placate his supporters. But then, just this Tuesday, he tried to divert attention from the issue by describing the inquiry as boring, but said he backed the release of any credible files without specifying what they were. Not the client list, I'm telling you right now. But anyway, Trump said, quote, "I don't understand why the Jeffrey Epstein case would be of interest to anybody." Then he went on to say, it's pretty boring stuff. It's sordid, but it's boring. And I don't understand why it keeps going. I don't know about y'all, but usually when things are sordid, they're anything but boring. But this is Trump talking. Okay. And he further goes on to say, "I think really only pretty bad people, including fake news, want to keep something like that. But credible information, let them give it. Anything that's credible, I would go ahead and say, let them have it." Now, during his election campaigns, Trump fueled multiple conspiracy theories by his MAGA movement, including that the country was controlled by a shadowy deep state of elites. Yeah, I have thoughts about that, but I only have an hour. So this has caused deep paranoia among his base, who are now unusually questioning their leader over the Epstein controversy. Now, last week, the Justice Department and the FBI announced that a review of the case files had confirmed that Epstein killed himself and there was no list of his clients to be made public. The police have investigated themselves and they have found no problems with their behavior. Conservative allies of the president have focused their anger on the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, who was leading the investigation into the case, as she previously said that Epstein's client list was sitting on my desk right now to review. Several other high profile conservatives have called for Trump to make public everything known about Epstein. Even his daughter in law, Lara Trump, who is a Fox News host, has been critical, saying, "I do think there needs to be more transparency on this." I don't think that was critical enough. Then on Tuesday, Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, called for the Justice Department to make the whole document public, breaking with Trump in a rare moment of friction between the allies, and make sure Johnson is safe the rest of this weekend. But Johnson said it's a very delicate subject, but we should put everything out there and let the people decide it. Johnson said this to Benny Johnson, who's a right-wing podcaster, in an interview that he just did on Tuesday. And he went on to say, "I agree with the sentiment that we need to put it out there." But here's the thing, dear listeners, how is this a delicate subject when these are the same people who made up and got political traction off of the Pizzagate lie about a Democrat run child sex and blood drinking ring in the basement of a small pizza shop in Arlington. Right? That makes no sense. These people are full of baloney, and that's an insult to baloney, which I repeatedly tell you is delicious. So I have no problem with baloney. I apologize to baloney for the insult. Anyway, all of this started with the WikiLeaks emails of Hillary Clinton's campaign chairman, John Podesta. Remember them? James Alefantis, who was the owner of Comet Ping Pong, a pizza parlor in Arlington, very mid too, asked Podesta about having a Democrat fundraiser for Hillary Clinton at his pizza place. And in some of the emails exchanged, Podesta said things like, yeah, sure, I'd love to come and get a big cheese pizza, something like that. But on the internet message boards, anonymous users started saying that cheese pizza was code for child pornography, and that Comet was the site of a vast Democratic child sex ring. I'm not kidding. That's where this foolishness about conservatives being obsessed about child sex trafficking, this is where it came from. Alex Jones and other far right personalities picked up the bait, and before you knew it, Pizzagate went viral. But it wasn't just far right folks online railing against Pizzagate. This weirdo, wacko conspiracy made the rounds among progressive circles too, drawing some allegedly progressive people into the ranks of the far right over their alleged shared love for children who were not being abused, and their shared disdain for the Democratic Party. Now, I unfriended quite a few of these so-called progressives on social media for sharing and supporting this stupid story. And I have to tell you, I was shocked by how easily people were taken in by it. And not just online either, because Edgar Madison Welch drove 350 miles from Salisbury, North Carolina to Comet Ping Pong Pizza in Northwest DC to deal with this pedo ring run by evil Democrats. In a cell phone video he recorded on his way to DC, he said to his two daughters who he had left back at home sleeping, quote, "I can't let you grow up in a world that's so corrupt by evil without at least standing up for you and for other children just like you." So he walked into Comet Ping Pong Pizza restaurant on December 4, 2016, armed with a loaded automatic rifle, with the intention of raiding the pedo ring to quote unquote stand up against a corrupt system that kidnaps, tortures, and rapes babies and children in our own backyard. After searching for this dungeon child prison and finding none, he surrendered to police who were outside waiting for him. Welch was sentenced to 4 years in prison in June of 2017, but on October 28, 2017, someone calling himself Q, just the letter Q, and claiming to be a high-ranking intelligence officer. I was wondering why people believe this foolishness so much from this Q person, and then I realized, oh, they claim they were in the intelligence, and people believe them. This person began posting on 4chan that not only was there a child pedophile ring run by Democrats, but also claimed even after this person who went to Arlington to find and bust up the ring found no such thing, this person Q still claimed that there was a ring, but also claimed that satanic pedophiles controlled not only Comet Ping Pong Pizza, but the world, drinking children's blood to stay young. I'm not making this. I'm not the one making this crazy stuff up. Q, this person promised that Trump and other government insiders would bring this cabal of vampiric, undead, eternal Democrat child sex traffickers to justice. And just like that, the Pizzagate conspiracy not only grew, but it was given a leader in Donald Trump. So, of course, Trump would never have been convicted over a conspiracy theory that he didn't start, but this thing propelled one man to drive 350 miles to shoot up a pizza parlor to free imprisoned children. But it's amazing. And it's still crazy to me that people were and still are more upset that Democrats might be drinking children's blood in the basement of a pizza parlor that turned out to be an absolute lie than they were that Hillary Clinton's campaign strategy that the emails exposed was to ignore any policies that Black Lives Matter activists presented to her to address issues of racist police abuse and systemic racism, or any of the real life policies that affect real life children, especially little Black and brown and indigenous real life children. But now Trump, who is of course in the doggone Epstein files. Come on now, y'all. And so are a lot of Democrats, including Bill Clinton. That's why you're never going to see this list. Now he is proving not to be the hero, saver of child sex slaves and vampire food, I guess, that Q and MAGA propped him up to be. Epstein's clientele were powerful, mostly white men, and I bet some women. And I do have to say mostly white because you and I know doggone well, dear listeners, that if that list were made up of a bunch of, I don't know, athletes or actors or even academics or politicians who were mostly Black or at least not white, it would have been published the day Epstein was arrested. You know that's true. But it wasn't. And Trump does not want that information to be released now. But hey, look, all these MAGA folks, if they're so concerned about pedophiles, they can always start asking questions about what ICE is doing with all those children they're kidnapping. They can go down to those detention centers and they can see the actual real life children that are being held in captivity by real life traffickers who are not Democrats. But of course, they won't do that because they don't care about those little brown and Black kids, because they don't care about children unless they think Democrats are hurting little white kids just like theirs and nobody else's. We ain't never gonna see that Epstein client list, y'all, because all the people who are on it are still in positions of power and influence. Now, when they're all gone, maybe it will be released in 10 or 20 years, maybe, but don't hold your breath. Okay, so now let's talk about the shenanigans in the New York race, shall we? Because I'm tired of saying I told you so. So I'm just going to go on and tell you what is happening. A news outlet called AM New York reports that Trump publicans want to deport Zoharn Mamdani because, look, that's how they're going to deal with anybody who they don't like. Weirdly, though, one of his biggest defenders in New York is coming out to be the despicable Democrat Zionist Richie Torres. I'm not kidding. When President Donald Trump threatened to arrest Mamdani, Torres called it disgraceful. When more Republicans attacked Mamdani, Torres slammed them as Islamophobic on MSNBC. I didn't know he knew what that word meant. And when the controversy emerged around Mamdani identifying himself as African American on his college application, Torres defended him, saying, quote, "I have had political opponents question the authenticity of my Afro-Latino identity and question my Blackness. And I deeply, deeply resent it. It makes my blood boil." Look, to be clear, Mamdani was born in Kampala, Uganda, into an Indian family to academic Mahmoud Mamdani and filmmaker Mira Nair. I do not care that he checked a box on a college application that indicated he is African and American because he was born in Uganda, which is in Africa, y'all. And he was he's an American citizen. So kind of technical. And honestly, I don't care. I don't care because I swear we get mad at the wrong thing sometimes. Anyway, Torres even introduced a bill to censure Tennessee House Republicans who called for Mamdani's deportation. And Torres is even seen smiling ear to ear in a group photo with Mamdani. Torres told the news outlet Playbook, quote, if Donald Trump and congressional Republicans are despicably demanding the deportation and denaturalization of a Democratic nominee simply because he is a Muslim American, then I will speak out forcefully against their bigotry. And Democrats across the ideological spectrum should do the same. We must stand up and speak out against all forms of bigotry with moral clarity and consistency. Yeah, except for when it comes to genocide, because that is undoubtedly a result of unchecked bigotry. Genocide is. But Torres has not only not spoken out about that, but has either been silent on or has fully supported and amplified the bigoted Islamophobic lies claiming anti Semitism and asking for repression against anti genocide protesters. And this is the guy who says that he and Mamdani have talked, had a few phone conversations, and agreed to a working relationship. Huh. And if that doesn't cause a bit of concern, then there's the controversy surrounding the phrase globalize the intifada that Zionists are trying to use against Mamdani. But in typical liberal political fashion, he is folding under the pressure. Oh, calm down. I'm not being mean. He really is folding under the pressure. I'm not lying. First, let's be clear. The word intifada is an Arabic word meaning shaking off or uprising. While it can broadly refer to any rebellion or resistance movement against oppression, in the context of the Israeli occupation and genocide in Palestine, it specifically denotes periods of organized Palestinian uprising against Israeli occupation of Palestinian territories, which is the whole country. But Mamdani said during a recent TV interview that he now discourages using the phrase globalize the intifada as he seeks to quell a weeks-long controversy over his repeated refusal to condemn the slogan that many Jewish New Yorkers allegedly see as an incitement to violence. Ugh. I didn't say it. Another news outlet said it. So Mamdani said that while some New Yorkers view the saying as a call to end the Israeli occupation of Palestinian land, that's what it means. He also said it evokes memories of violence against Jewish people for others. He gave the answer following meetings this week with some of the city's top business leaders, business and Jewish leaders, who are concerned about his previous responses to the rallying cry. Somehow, the same people condemning a phrase that calls for rising up against oppression and occupation of their land have nothing to say about the violence of the occupation, the violence of the apartheid, the violence of the genocide. But yeah, they're sensitive about the way their violence against Palestinian is seen and talked about, I guess. Whatever, man. Specifically, Mamdani said that he now recognizes that the phrase reminds many Jewish New Yorkers of the Second Intifada, which was a Palestinian uprising against Israel in the early 2000s that involved a series of Palestinian suicide bombings that killed Israelis. I don't like calling them civilians because they're not. He said it's heard as a reference to bus bombings in Haifa, restaurant attacks in Jerusalem, and engenders a fear of the possibility of those very attacks coming home here in New York City. That distance between what some intend and what others hear is a bridge that is too far, and it is why I have not used the phrase, and it is why I discourage its use. That's what Mamdani said. And y'all, the logic here is not logicking. Because if New Yorkers who don't like the phrase globalize the intifada, if they stay home in New York, then they won't have a problem with the phrase. Because if Israel left Palestine, there would be no need for an intifada, would there? The reason intifadas, uprisings, happen is because Israel is committing crimes against Palestinian humanity, sovereignty, and dignity. Don't like globalize the intifada? Get out of Palestine. But instead of Mamdani telling them this, he's discouraging the use of a phrase that means the whole world needs to rise up to defend Palestine from Israel's settler colonial white supremacist occupation, apartheid, and genocide. But this is not an isolated faux pas that many of you listening probably think I'm just nitpicking. It's part of Mamdani's wider strategy to try to shore up Democratic support for his campaign, which the New York outlet The City reported that he may have made some headway in a recent meeting with congressional Democrats, the gathering, a breakfast hosted by other allegedly progressive sellout Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez at the restaurant Ahmad, just south of the Capitol, was advertised as an organizing workshop for members. Lawmakers told reporters they also saw the meeting as an opportunity for Mamdani to allay outstanding concerns. New York Representative Jerry Nadler, who endorsed Mamdani after his primary win, told reporters while leaving the meeting that he thinks the candidate won over several Democrats who previously had concerns. Nadler coordinated a meeting this week between Mamdani and Jewish elected officials. Excuse me, at the same time, lawmakers said there were hardly any discussions about the Israel-Palestine issue that moderate Democrats have cited as a barrier to endorsing the New York State Assemblyman for the mayoral seat. Mamdani's views on the phrase globalize the intifada did not come up. Representative Andre Carson said, but it was a very uplifting conversation, he said, adding that Mamdani is a smart man and will do what he needs to do when it comes to allaying concerns about his rhetoric. Progressive except for Palestine? That's what this sounds like to me. Because what Mamdani needs to do, according to this Democrat representative, is exactly what I'm telling you he's doing. And that's backtracking on full-throated support for Palestinian liberation, self-determination, sovereignty, and demands to end the Israeli occupation of their land. That is the only way Democrats will even think about supporting him, is if he disavows that, or at least doesn't say anything else about it. And after that, they're going to harp on the socialist stuff, and he'll cave on that too. I don't want to say I told you so, but here we are. So I'm going to say, excuse me, what Mamdani cannot say, because he's running for office. And rather than turn to the people for their support, he's turning to the Democrats who have already sold the Palestinians out and have shown his willingness to compromise on the human dignity of Palestinians and Iranians and Syrians and Yemenis and Jordanians and Congolese and Sudanese and working class and poor folks in the U.S. that Israel crimes directly impact. We're going to talk about why we need to be clear that, yeah, globalize the intifada is what needs to be done. But first, let's go to our station break, because I want to have plenty of time to tell you all of what's next. So, engineer extraordinaire, what's on tap for the people today?
From August 3rd through the 16th, during our summer pledge drive, we present WPFW, 48 Years of Centering Blackness. We'll commemorate Black August and celebrate not only the freedom fighters, political prisoners, and those who have perished in the struggle for Black liberation, but also the scholars, musicians, and poets whose work has served the Black liberation struggle. There are forces working to erase the contributions and significance of Black people. Your contribution ensures that WPFW is not erased and that the voices of Black people throughout the diaspora continue to be platformed here. Donations can be made anytime at WPFWFM.org. WPFW, building a better world, one broadcast at a time.
Thank you so much, Also, tomorrow, Saturday, July 19th, the Black Alliance for Peace Baltimore and the All African People's Revolutionary Party will hold a town hall on forced migration and imperialism, the continuity of African dispossession from the transatlantic slave trade to neocolonialism at Payne Memorial AME Church in Baltimore, Maryland. That's at 1714 Madison Avenue, Baltimore, Maryland, from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. Doors will open at 12:30. African people have been uprooted for centuries, first through the transatlantic slave trade, and forced migration continues to plague us today. This discussion will examine how imperialism fuels displacement and the tactics and methods by which people are displaced. Find more information at Instagram.com/BAP_Baltimore. Then on Wednesday, July 23rd at 7 p.m., Pan African Community Action, or PACA, will hold its next Assata Shakur study group at the Black Workers and Wellness Center at 2500 Martin Luther King Jr. Avenue Southeast to discuss cops, curfews, and the criminalization of Black youth in D.C. Explore how the criminalization of Black youth operates in D.C. and why it's essential for youth to be at the heart of revolutionary response to community issues. Find more information at Criminalizing Black DC Youth Part 2, all one word, Criminalizing Black DC Youth Part 2, the number 2 at the end, .eventbrite.com. Now let's get to some history. Because the foundational issues in the ongoing and existential conflict between Israeli settlers and indigenous Palestinians, not a continued and historical hatred of Jews, as many Zionists claim. That's not what this is. But why do we make the distinction that opposition to Zionism is not automatically opposition to Jewish people? I think to understand why we do this and why that's correct is to understand what Zionism is and the contradictions therein. First, Zionism itself is not entirely synonymous with Judaism. Although it is true that the Zionist movement was officially organized by Theodor Herzl in Austria in 1896 to establish a Jewish homeland in response to the bigotry and repression against Jews in Europe, it is important to understand that Herzl was not himself an Orthodox or observant Jew. He was an atheist, practically, much more secular than religious. Herzl, according to the website jewishhistory.org, did not envision a Jewish homeland as a place that Jews like himself, who were fully assimilated into European Western society, would want or need to immigrate to. Rather, Herzl viewed a Jewish homeland as a place where poor Jews from Eastern European nations who did not assimilate into those societies could relocate and rebuild their lives in peace. But from the beginning, there was always a conflict among the proponents of Zionism regarding the role of the Jewish religion in the movement. Clue number one, that Zionism was not a religious movement. Herzl considered Zionism a purely practical solution to Jewish persecution, providing a way to materially save Jewish people without focusing too much, if at all, on promoting or even preserving Jewish religious tradition. And this was the posture of the first 4 Zionist congresses, which adopted resolutions that were neutral on the issue of the Jewish religion, which they identified as Jewish culture. And they declared that the movement would never do anything, the movement, Zionism, would never do anything to oppose the Jewish faith, but it would also never do anything to support or promote it either. Even under the leadership of Chaim Weizmann, who succeeded Herzl after he died, the place of Jewish religious tradition within Zionism was still a matter of internal conflict. Weizmann did not see Zionism as representative of the assimilationism, formality, and Western influence Jews of Herzl's camp, but as a movement that should represent the oppressed Jewish masses from Eastern Europe and their modesty and simplicity. This was not only a matter of what class of Jews the Zionist movement would be directed by and would serve, but what culture that movement would impart to Jews within the movement and what Zionism would present to the world. But while it seemed that Weizmann was more opposed to the class element that Herzl's vision projected for Zionism, the traditional Eastern European Jews of the time believed that Jewish religious tradition needed to be central to Zionism, while the Western European Jews felt the opposite. So, internal debate on the role of Jewish religious tradition within Zionism was not purely a class issue among the rank and file, but was also dictated by regional differences as well. And these differences even fell along political lines. For instance, socialist Marxist Jews, they exist, did not believe Zionism should focus on religion at all. This was in opposition to the views of Jews who were more politically conservative or flat out right wing. These differences of opinion on the role of the Jewish religion in the early establishment of Zionism persist to this day, as do other contradictions. According to the website JewishUnpacked.com, which is not an anti-Zionist outlet at all, there are 6 different types of Zionist thinking. They are political, labor, revisionist, religious, cultural, and diasporic. All of these support the establishment of a Jewish Zionist state, but with disparate views on what it would look like. And I raise these different schools of thought within Zionism to highlight the most important point among most of them, the one crippling and consequential flaw in all but 2 of these schools of thought, and that is the desire and certainly necessity to create a safe haven for oppressed Jewish people was pursued by Zionists without much, if any, regard for the indigenous population in Palestine. For example, while early political Zionists believed in a gradual immigration of Jews to settle Palestine, revisionists believed in rapid mass Jewish immigration in order to claim sovereignty over all of biblical Israel and establish a single state on both sides of the Jordan River, a single Jewish state. Also, while other Zionist leaders wanted to work with the British, who colonized and controlled Palestine at the time, because they believed the British would eventually transfer power to them, revisionists didn't trust the British and believed that the British, that they would have to fight and win. They would have to fight the British and win their own sovereignty over Palestine. All of this is a problem. First, because both revisionists and other Zionists believed that British colonists had a right to give them control over Palestine, that they had a right to control Palestine in the first place, or that they had a right to fight so that they could control Palestine, fighting the British for control over Palestine, rather than any of them, considering recognizing the sovereignty of Palestinians over their own land. Then, diasporic Zionists expanded the definition of a Zionist to include those who supported the idea of Jewish nationalism, but who did not need to settle in Palestine to establish a Jewish homeland there. Now, these different types of Zionism cites in this article cites U.S. Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis. Yes, the guy that the university is named after, who said, quote, "Every Irish American who contributed toward advancing home rule was a better man and a better American for the sacrifice he made. Every American Jew who aids in advancing the Jewish settlement in Palestine will likewise be a better man and a better American for doing so," end quote. But here's the problem with that comparison. The Irish were fighting for freedom from colonization by Britain. Even when they immigrated to the U.S. from Ireland to escape colonial repression, poverty, and starvation. Conversely, Zionists were fighting to colonize Palestine by forcibly displacing the indigenous population of Palestinians, which is decidedly not the same fight the Irish in the US or anywhere else were engaged in. Interestingly, though, two of the six schools of Zionist thought do recognize the problem of disenfranchising the indigenous Palestinian population in establishing a Jewish state. Cultural Zionism focuses more on advancing Jewish culture through the teaching of Jewish history, texts, language, literature, music, and art, and establishing Israel as a culture hub for the Jewish diaspora. Its main proponent, theologian, philosopher, and committed Zionist, Martin Buber, or is it Boubet? I'm sorry if I mispronounce it, argued not only that there must be Arab-Jewish reconciliation before a Jewish state could be established, but he also advocated for a one-state solution that accommodated the claims to the land of both peoples. Then there is the religious Zionism, in which religious Jews living in Palestine initially viewed the first wave of European Jewish settlers, who were largely secular or openly anti-religious, as new Jews, who they believed would create a Jewish society devoid of traditional religious expression, where the Orthodox Jewish community would not be welcome. These religious Jews also did not adhere to the Zionist ideology and believed that establishing the state of Israel was a violation of the three oaths in the Talmud, which states that Jews vow not to reclaim biblical Israel by force and not do this themselves until the Messiah came to do it as was promised, if other nations would not oppress Jews too badly. However, a movement to convince these religious Jews opposed to Zionism created a religious case for Zionism that said that Zionism itself was the messianic redemption of Jews, rather than the need to wait for a Jewish Messiah to return for redemption yes, they actually said that Zionism is the Messiah for Jews. Religious Zionism did this by arguing that one of the three oaths was violated because Jews were persecuted by other nations very badly. So Jews were no longer beholden to maintain their end of the deal. So over time, some religious or observant Jews were won over to Zionism. It is important to note, nevertheless, that there is still a large segment of Orthodox Jews who oppose the establishment of Israel on the religious ground stated above. One of those groups, and perhaps the most vocal and visible, at least in the United States, is the Neturei Karta, which is among other Orthodox Jewish communities in Jerusalem that have been consistent targets of Israeli oppression, along with Palestinian Muslims and Christians, as well as Ethiopian and other African descended Jews and immigrants. So Israel is a state that exists through the logic of indigenous dispossession and apartheid. There is one set of rights and freedoms for European descended Zionist immigrants and their descendants. So stop calling them Jews, because that's not what they're Zionists. But this set of rights depends on racial discrimination against non-European descended people of all faiths, including Palestinian, African, and other Arab Jews and their descendants. This is the basis for the popular resistance to the state of Israel today, not the simplistic and false allegation of hatred of Jews. But now that the issue of religion has been raised, it's important to look at the claim of Zionists that they have a divine right to all of Palestine because of a promise made to the ancient Israelites by God. Now, I'm going to have to get into the religious claims and the lies people have crafted from the scriptures to support this claim on another show. But there's enough history, real history, not in the Bible, not in the Torah, not in the Talmud, real history to address this issue to provide clarity today. So let's get there. It's true that Jews have a documented historical presence in the ancient region known as Palestine, but they have also historically had ancient connections to several other locales in what is known as the ancient Near East and the Eastern Mediterranean, like Egypt, Mesopotamia, and Greece. At the same time, other people also have ancient claims to that land in those regions. Palestinians obviously are among those people, and their long history in this region is just as vitally important to untangling the truth of this, particularly in exposing the actual historical relationship between Jews and Arabs and Muslims. The Ottoman Turks invaded and occupied Palestine for 400 years, from 1516 to 1917. But Ottoman occupation was interesting because Jewish refugees from Spanish persecution, Muslim fundamentalists, Sufi mystics, Franciscan Catholic monks, and merchants and traders from near and far, from all walks of life, lived together in Jerusalem, particularly after the brutal French Crusades decimated the city, extending the longest period of peace in Palestine under Ottoman rule that began in 1187. Before then, from 1099 until 1187, Pope Urban II unleashed the Crusades upon Jerusalem to, quote unquote, liberate the holy places from the infidels, which had all the non-Christian inhabitants of Jerusalem killed. Urban II's blood-soaked anti-Muslim and anti-Jewish edict was in part in response to the establishment of the construction of the Dome of the Rock, a temple created to honor the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, his descent into heaven by the Arabs, who drove out the Byzantines in 635. During that period of Muslim rule, from 635 until 1099, Orthodox Christians and other people of the book, al-Kitab, meaning Jews and Christians, since the book in question was the Bible, and for Christians and the Torah, the Bible for Christians and the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible for Jews, were given safe haven and religious and social equality in Jerusalem by the Arab Muslims. This is significant because in the period before Arab rule, beginning in 132, Rome put down the last of the Jewish rebellions against them in the city of Betar in Judea. Jewish military leader Simon Bar Kokhba was killed by Roman troops after he led a revolt against the Roman Empire, and all Jews were either killed, enslaved, or ultimately expelled from the city. The city was then plowed under. A new city called Jupiter Capitolonius was built on top of the ruins. It was first a city honoring Jupiter, Jove, and other pagan gods, as well as its Roman emperor Hadrian. And then it was transformed into a Christian city, representing the life of Christ under Constantine in 324, when he ruled Rome and formalized Christianity as the official Roman religion. While modern Jerusalem in Palestine began on the remnants of a Jewish city destroyed, built over, and inhabited by the Romans in 135 BCE, the history of the region did not begin with its Jewish inhabitants. Before then, Jerusalem and the surrounding regions were inhabited by and conquered by several groups of people, including Jebusites and Canaanites, who were ousted by the ancient Israelites in 1000 BCE. Palestine was routed by the Egyptian pharaoh Shishonk in 930 BCE. The ancient kingdom of Israel was destroyed by Assyrian king Shalmaneser in 722 BCE. Jerusalem thrived under Judean king Hezekiah until the city's destruction by the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar in 586 BCE, when Jerusalem became a Christian city under Constantine in 324 CE. Jews and non-Orthodox Christians were barred from the city until 635, when Arabs began their first rule over Jerusalem. It is noteworthy that this takeover was not achieved by violent conquest, but by negotiation, after which Muslim rulers readmitted Jews and non-Orthodox Christians back into Jerusalem who had been exiled, after the three faiths lived together under Muslim rule peacefully for centuries. In 1099 CE, the Crusades facilitated the eradication of all non-Christians in Jerusalem, which meant Muslims and Jews, by the French until 1187, when the Ottoman Turks invaded and conquered Jerusalem and all of Palestine and surrounding regions, again opening Jerusalem up to Jews and Christians under Muslim rule. So even if we take into account the argument that Zionists make about the biblical claim to all of Palestine, the fact that repeatedly throughout documented history, it was Arab Muslim rulers who welcomed Jews and non-Orthodox Christians back into the so-called Holy City that Orthodox Christians repeatedly exiled them from, that history of Arab hospitality and goodwill toward Jews, nor is this long history of changing claims to the land, this history is not mentioned or taken into account when many Zionists today speak of their right to all of Palestine. Instead, they forcibly remove the people whose ancestors were on the land and repeatedly welcome theirs from exile, slavery, and extermination, all while claiming an incorrect narrative of Arab hatred toward them simply because they are Jews. And again, remember, we are talking about immigrants from Europe who occupy modern Israel. They're not even the same people this history I just told you are talking about. But it is not just the ancient history of the presence of multiple groups of people in Palestine and the kindness shown to Jews throughout history by Muslims that Zionists ignore in their illegitimate claim to the land. But they also ignore the modern history and the role of colonialism in the oppression of the Palestinian people and their role in embracing and continuing it. Now, here we're going to talk about the history of the Allied forces, World War I, how the coalition to support Zionism and their effort to colonize Palestine, how it came about. Who was Lord Balfour? What did the Balfour Declaration actually say? Why is the Balfour Declaration an illegitimate piece of paper that was written by a racist pig because he was? What did Harry Truman have to do with the illegitimate establishment of the nation state of Israel through the illegitimate UN vote to partition Israel? And is that UN resolution on the partitioning of Israel, is that really legitimate? Well, we're going to talk about all of that, dear friends, dear listeners, and dear viewers, next time, because we only had an hour and we can only step through this history a chunk at a time. This is the history of the genocide that we are watching live streamed today. What Israel is doing today is not being done because the Bible says they have the right to that land. This is not being done because the Torah says they have the right to that land. This isn't being done because God said they have the right to that land. This is being done because these folks are white supremacist settler colonists, and the state of Israel is another white supremacist, settler colonial, patriarchal, xenophobic, racist institution, just like its big brother, the United States, is. And the tactics Israel has used to claim now nearly 80% of Palestine resemble the tactics that Nazis used in their eradication of not just Jews from Germany and Poland and surrounding European countries, but other so-called undesirables like queer people, disabled people mentally and physically, like socialists and communists, like artists and intellectuals and academics who were opposed to Nazism, like religious leaders who were opposed to Nazism, like Africans. They practiced on the Nama people in Namibia before they carried out the Holocaust in Germany. We're going to talk about all that next week because this history is too important for us to continue to trust politicians, celebrities, or talking heads who are beholden to any particular ideology that is not just simply telling the truth. So, dear listeners and dear viewers, I'm not sitting here telling you that Mamdani is not someone that we should vote for because of his very obvious weakness in being able to hold the line against genocide. Am I going to vote for? Thankfully, I don't live in New York, so I can't vote for him. I'm not telling y'all in New York who you should vote for. I'm just telling you what the man said and why he did it and why he said it. You decide for yourself whether someone who cannot stand up against genocide is worth voting for, and whether you believe such a person is really going to be faithful in standing up for your interests or not. That's a decision you have to make. But for me, I'm going to continue doing what I do. So please join me next week on Darker Than Blue, where we will continue talking about this history of Zionism, what it really is, what it is not, and why we say globalize the intifada and do it today. I'm out of time here on Darker Than Blue. Thank you so much for joining me. As I always say, a luta continua. The struggle continues. But if we stick with this history and we pay attention to it and we honor it for the truth that it is, Victoria asserta. Victory is certain. Peace, y'all. Good night. Alrighty, folks, it will be a short little after show. Thanks so much. Y'all, I try to time the script and I do so much editing of the script when I try to time it that I never get the timing right. And there's always stuff left over. So the hour goes way faster than I think it does. So look, a word or two on Zoharn Mamdani. 3 words, specifically 3 words. I don't care. Please understand. I'm not concerned about what people are, oh, you're criticizing him. Oh, look at you on the left already. You're always criticizing the people who are our only hope. If you keep criticizing progressives, we're not going to have anybody. I don't care. Because honestly, if you know there is a genocide going on, and not only is Israel carrying out a genocide against Palestinians, but they are also implicated in the brutalization and the child slavery that's going on in Congo. And they're involved in the brutalization in Sudan. And they are involved in giving the United States intelligence on the AES. And they're involved in giving the United States and its police state surveillance technology that they use against us. You and me, the pigs who have their knee on the necks of our people. Where do you think they learned that from? The IOF. I do not call them the IDF. They're not the Israeli Defense Force. They're not defending anybody. They're settler colonial genocidaires. They are the Israeli occupation force. That is why we call them the IOF and not the IDF. Genocidaires don't deserve defense. They deserve eradication. So this stuff that folks are doing, that so-called progressives and a whole lot of liberals who are like, well, I guess I can be a progressive for a little while. This kind of stuff where they don't have a problem with someone who is a progressive who cannot stand firmly for human rights and dignity in the middle of a live stream genocide. Do you think I give a damn that you are mad that I am criticizing a politician who a few weeks ago was saying Palestinians have a right to exist? I support Palestinian sovereignty. And now this week, because he's trying to get support and money from Democrats, now he's talking about, oh, I'm going to encourage people not to use the phrase globalize the intifada, further criminalizing legitimate expressions for people to oppose genocide. If that's the kind of politician you want to support, help yourself. Help yourself. I will not. So this whole and I'm tired of having this argument with progressives, and increasingly I'm annoyed at a bunch of liberals who have decided that instead of calling out the Democratic Party for their bullshit, and instead of calling out the weak ass betraying, backstabbing progressives like AOC and now Mamdani, as far as I'm concerned, and instead of calling them out, they're going to turn on us. They're going to, oh, this is the left's fault. This is their knee-jerk hatred of the Democrats. No, my hatred of the Democrats is not knee-jerk. I don't hate them just because they're Democrats. I hate them because they're liars. And we talked a little bit last week about the history of that. And yeah, I'm going to have to come back to the rest of the fallout of the Democrats' rightward turn and their third way platform, because the third way platform is what got us the Welfare Reform Act under Bill Clinton. And we know what that did. It made more people poor. It increased poverty. Welfare to work. I remember that bullshit. Do you understand? So I think it's wild that once again we had the same conversation about Bernie Sanders and his look, universal policy is all we need. All we need is Medicare for all. And then when people started asking, well, okay, Bernie, but what about, like we talked about last week, what about the racism in healthcare delivery? How is universal healthcare gonna fix that? He didn't have an answer for it because he didn't want to talk about it. And then all of the white progressive supporters started turning on the black progressives who were trying to get Bernie Sanders to pay attention to racism, because all the white people were like, all we need is universal policies. And we're trying to tell folks, universal policies won't fix racism. Universal policies will not fix homophobia and transphobia. Universal policies won't fix xenophobia. These are specific issues that are within the oppressive structure of capitalism. So yes, the destruction of capitalism must happen. Universal policies that benefit all the people must. We need socialism, and real socialism, not this democratic socialism, halfway milquetoast, European Nordic model bullshit. No, baby. I want Cuban socialism. I want Chinese socialism. Hell, I want Soviet Union socialism before they fucked it up. I want the socialism of the global South. I want real socialism. And even when we do that, we are going to have to deal with the vestiges of settler colonialism, the racism, the homophobia, the transphobia, the xenophobia, the Islamophobia. These isms and obias and phobias are the result of settler colonial pan-European domination and indoctrination. It is how they pit groups of people against each other in their colonies. And it is how they uniquely oppress each group of people in different ways while they're screwing everybody over. We keep trying to have this conversation with white progressives in this country, and they keep sticking their fingers in their ears, talking about all we need is Medicare for all. All we need is Medicare for all. All y'all talk about is racism. We're tired of having to organize with the blacks. And that's why so many white progressives end up on the damn right. That's why it happened. That's what you saw in the last election cycle. All of these white folks scooting on over to the alt right, talking about we have more in common with them. We can win if we organize with the. So, me personally, and this is just me personally. This is not Jackie Luqman, the representative of anything else. This is just Jackie Luqman, the organizer, the individual. I'm sick of having these conversations with white people of any political persuasion. And I am growing more annoyed at having to deal with black people over the left and the actual left. And we can have a conversation about what the left is or is not in the United States, because the left is a mess. It is absolutely a mess. But the left is a mess because white leftists will not listen to the people who have been in this struggle all our damn lives, the whole time we've been here. And before we even got here, because before we got here, we were fighting the colonization of the continent. So, oh, let me look at your comments. Let me scoot over here and look at what y'all have to say, because you all always do have really, really fantastic comments. And I do hate to miss them, because very often you all will bring up something that I hadn't thought of or had forgotten. You correct me when I'm wrong, and I appreciate those of you who do that in a principled way, and you're not mean about it. That that be getting under my skin, because I'm sensitive about my art. This is art. This is my art. I'm not creative in any other way but this. Words. So, okay, and gardening. Yeah, that kind of thing. All right, so let me see what y'all got to say. I'm so glad y'all are here. Thank you. Thank you. You know what about the Epstein thing? Leah, I think you're right. I think you are right. I think that there are so many powerful white folks on this client list that is pretty much everybody in everybody's government in Europe and probably a few countries that we would be surprised in. So I don't expect to ever see this client list, because the people who are on that list, they are not all going to leave this life at the same time. And so I think you're right. If that client list is ever released to the public, I think governments would topple. And that's why we're never going to see it. So let me see what else y'all had to say. Hey, Chichi Macho, 1025. She said they said people might not remember policies he promised, but in the age of the spectacle and entertainment distractions, he promised this. Isn't that weird? Like, people don't remember anything he said about like actual policy, because really, when has he ever really talked about actual policy? But they remember this foolishness. And it is foolishness because, like I said, the whole Pizzagate thing was a damn lie. It was, and I mean, if you're going to create a conspiracy, can you not like claim that people are vampires? Like, if you're going to create a conspiracy to smear public figures, like, make it real. Because as much as I love a good vampire story and a good werewolf story and a really good zombie movie, they don't exist. They're imaginary monsters. So if you're going to create a conspiracy, don't throw imaginary monsters in it. Don't talk about people are drinking children's blood to stay young. Jesus Christ. But they believe it. And that lie. Pizzagate is where movies like Sound of Freedom came from, y'all. This entire, I forget the name of, y'all know the name of the studio and the director who produced this movie, Sound of Freedom, on the story about some guy busting up a child trafficking ring. They have created a whole what do you want to call it? Um, a community, a society, whatever, off of it. They are still, the MAGA supporters are still hard on this child trafficking thing, while I am pretty sure a good 1/3 to probably 2/3 of they pastors, they know they don't let their daughters be alone in a room with their pastor or their youth leader. They know damn well they don't. But they talking about some Democrats drinking some children's blood. Man, shut the hell. They remember that. Okay. But they don't care about the children. But okay. Yeah. All right. Still, let me see. Yes. Yes. Yep. That's so Walter. Walter said this. Passion of the Christ. I remember that movie came out, and oh, I was a real holy Christian back then. I ain't know nothing. I was stupid. I was just as stupid as the rest of them. And I'm sitting in the movie theater crying, oh, my Savior. And a couple of years later, I was like, I was a fucking idiot. That was a snuff film. That was violence porn for Christians. Because it was disgusting. And it wasn't even, oh my God, it was bad. Yes, but yes, starring Jim Caviezel and he is one of them. Caviezel is one of those MAGA supporters. It's so disappointing. But oh well. So yeah, yeah, it's just a mess. But you know, it's really difficult, I think, to look at this moment politically, um and to not, at least it is for me, and to not be really um disgusted with the ease with which, now I understand we are all deeply indoctrinated to believe a bunch of lies and bullshit about things that didn't happen, that politicians say the United States did that were good, and about things that the United States did that were absolutely horrible that we're not told the United States did. Yep, that's absolutely true. But it bothers me that people who know, who have access to the truth, who know, who have been told the truth, are still stuck on, well, we have to support the Democrats because we'll get the Republicans. When you know damn well the Democrats are in league with the Republicans. We talked about that last week. We'll talk about it again. And it's not something we made up. It is what the Democrats said they changed their platform and their strategy to do, to move away from focusing on the issues of blacks, women, gay people, labor unions. They literally said that. So I don't understand why people are mad at leftists when we point out the Democrats are as bad as Republicans, because Democrats themselves said we're going to borrow Republican policies, package them as Democratic so we can appeal to Republicans. Democrats literally said, we want to grow our party. No, they didn't say they wanted to grow their party. They said they wanted to maintain their power by attracting the votes of more Republicans and abandoning us. They said that. I didn't say it. So I don't understand why people are mad at us, talking about we have a knee-jerk hatred of Democrats. No, I just know the history. And anyway, I'm not even the first person who said that Democrats are the opposite wing of the same evil bird that the Republicans are a part of. You know who said that? Probably not even first. But you know who said it years, decades before I did? W.E.B. Du Bois. In the essay that I love to cite, I Won't Vote, that was published in the Nation magazine in 1956 or 8. It was either 1956 or 1958. Mm-hmm. So people who are criticizing leftists, who are accurately pointing out the complicity of the Democrats in colluding with Republicans in order to maintain their power, you pissed off at W.E.B. Du Bois for saying it first in 1956 or 58? You pissed off at him? Or are you just going to stay pissed off at us because you don't want to admit that we're right. And you are advocating for people to vote for the other party of oppression and genocide, the liberal party of oppression and genocide, the polite party of oppression and genocide that puts on the facade of solidarity with oppressed people with a few hashtags, hashtag BLM, hashtag rainbow flag, hashtag, whatever, but they turn around and govern off of borrowed Republican policies. How you mad at us? But again, this is the reason, this ridiculous I don't even know what to call it, deflection in responsibility that progressives and liberals continue to carry out. That's why there is no left in the US. It's not because we're a bunch of psycho communists. I am a communist. I'm just not crazy. Some people might think I am, but I'm actually fine. But I am a communist. I'm not ashamed of that. I like the idea that I'm a communist. I want communism. Communism is good for humanity. People have been practicing communalism, community living, community support. People will call it any and everything else. But what it is, communism. I don't have a problem with it. But our support of communism is not the reason the left is fractured. Our support of alleged socialist authoritarians and dictators, that's not the reason the left is fractured. Stalin was right, damn it. I don't care what you say. But we aren't the reason the left is weak. It's progressives and liberals who refuse to hold the Democratic Party responsible for their betrayal of the people. They're the reason the left is weak. I said what I said. I stand on what I said, and I will say it again. So die mad at me, because I am going to call out every instance of progressive and liberal hypocrisy when the conversation is whether you steadfastly oppose genocide or whether you're okay with a little bit of it so you can win an election. That's my stance, and I am sticking to it. Oh, here we go. Oh, bless your heart. Socialism is our money. Socialism is literally our money being used for our people. Socialism is the government using the resources that the government and the people provide and redistributing those resources to meet the needs of the people. So Margaret Thatcher opening up her pig lying neoliberal mouth and saying that socialism means that you run out of other people's money, she did what every white supremacist capitalist pig does. She lied. Socialism is not about other people's money. Socialism is the correct and responsible use of the resources of the country to meet the needs of the people of the country. So, yes, I want socialism. I want my tax dollars to pay for public education. I want my tax dollars to pay for everybody's health care. I want my tax dollars to pay for housing. And if that means I have to pay a little bit more in taxes, I'm happy to do it. Because if I have a little more, I should pay a little more so that nobody in society goes without their basic human rights: housing, healthcare, food, education, a clean environment, a job that pays a living wage, and enough leisure time so they can develop as human beings. That's socialism. And as Chairman Fred Hampton said, if you hate socialism, you hate yourself. That's all I got to say. Thank y'all very much for joining me. I believe Kim Brown is up next. I think I am going to go relax in the backyard. That I have finally cleaned up. The weeds had to be tamed. I'll see y'all next week. Appreciate you. Well then, James Rivera, okay, then you don't have to live, you can be homeless. You don't have to have any of the things that we crazy socialists are going to provide for the people. You can remain in a capitalist country where you have to fight and justify your right to have housing by working 3 jobs so you can afford the right to have a roof over your head. The rest of us, we're going to build a society where we take care of our people with our money. So I don't know why you decided to come on my show. Like, didn't you have anything better to do with your Friday evening? I don't understand this. I do not understand why people do this. Like, I do these shows because this history is important to me, and I think people should know it. But I don't understand why people waste their time to come on these shows and just disagree. Why? Okay, you don't like what I have to say. Get the fuck out. This ain't for you then, because you ain't changing my mind. And I'm really not trying to change yours. So have a good evening. Peace, y'all. Fucking psychos. Let me play my favorite song and get out of here. Bye.